Hi, I'm Bill Schweigart, and you should be watching the Crew Reviews and wearing pants, you filthy animal. Well, Christopher,
Yes.
it's been a long time since we had a show, and what better way to break the streak of silence than to bring the great Bill Schweigart on the show
Yes.
for his new book, which is over his shoulder, but it's right there over mine, The Guilty One. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. I appreciate you coming off of hiatus.
Well, it's been a long time coming with you. We've been looking forward to putting you on that side of the you guest hosted, I think, a time or two, and we're happy to have you downrange, so to speak.
Well, I appreciate that. I say now, we'll see after the lightning round.
Well, no, I'm just very excited because we may get some embarrassing stories, more embarrassing.
Are there any other kind?
They're the best. When they come from you, they're the best.
Well, let's start with a non-embarrassing story. Why don't you give us a thumbnail sketch? It's about that tall, of The Guilty One for the viewers at home who have not yet read it.
So The Guilty One features Detective Cal Farrell. Before he was a detective, he was the first on scene at an active shooter event. He was dealing with a drunken, disorderly arrest, and then all of a sudden there's a long tone on the police radio, and he realizes that there's an active shooter event unfolding moments away from his location. So he is the first to respond. He goes into the office building where it is occurring. He's passing dead bodies. He's passing the injured, trying to get to the shooter. He finally gets to the conference room where the shooter is holed up. He wheels in, and then he remembers nothing that transpires. He wakes up in the back of an ambulance. He is told that he has neutralized the shooter. He becomes a darling of the Alexandria, Virginia press, and he is quickly promoted to detective. But again, he remembers nothing of it. And again, he's told he's a hero, but things don't quite add up. His bosses don't quite meet his eye. He's hearing whispers from his colleagues on the force, and he's working with a police psychologist to recover his memories and deal with the trauma. And then 6 months later, he's running, exercising, trying to get back into the swing of things, and he spots a dead body hanging 70 feet high in a tree, impossibly high. And that is the first indication that we have that there is a serial killer operating in Alexandria, Virginia. And he throws himself into the investigation, and as it unfolds, each new body has sort of a connection to Cal. And he realizes he really has to solve this case because there are too many people who would be only too happy to make him the guilty one.
Awesome. And it's
Look at that. He ended with the title of the book.
Did I
That's
stick
a pro.
the landing?
You might be the first author to manage that. That was really well done. Really well done. Well,
it was very, very well done. Yes.
You talked a lot about Cal, and Cal is a wholly human, flawed, damaged protagonist who in no way is a sure bet to win.
Right, what you know.
Wow.
Well, I was going to say, so why did you choose to write an autobiographical story? No. Well, my actual question is, where did his DNA come from as you were creating this character in this story? Give me some of the inspiration for this creature.
You know, I mean, I watch all of your pods, and I see all of the wonderful thriller writers and crime writers that go through. And, you know, there are your action stars. They are done to perfection. I am not going to be able to do that. That's not my lane anyway. I kind of had to write somebody who is more human, who is, he's not a dark Avenger. He is actively involved in trying to be the best person that he can be. That's what I think separates Cal from maybe some of the other protagonists out there. I think there's a lot of like dark and haunted detectives out there who escape into a bottle or other pursuits, and they're really haunted. And Cal is for sure haunted, but he is actively involved in trying to improve himself. He is actively involved in narrowing the gap between where he is and his best self. Does that mean he's able to outrun those demons? He is absolutely not able to outrun those demons, but he's trying. And again, he is human. If you cut him, he bleeds. He does not. He's not Sherlock Holmes. He's not going to get solve the mystery just like that. I think he is a real flawed protagonist, but I think that is what helps folks root for him.
Absolutely. And I will say this, you do a great job of putting who he is and the fact that he's not Superman right out there in the very first scene. And I thought that was an excellent character introduction.
Well, my father was a police officer for a while, and he was, before he passed away, this is years and years ago when he was a young man, and he was kind of scrawny, and he had gotten one cuff on a suspect who was a very large man. And he said the guy swung him around like over his head. My dad's feet left the ground. I was like, and that sort of stuck. And I'm like, I'm going to use that. So spoilers, that is how you're introduced to Cal.
Yeah, I love that.
Page 1, like, what the hell am I doing here?
Love it.
I love that. And he, Cal does literally bleed in the story, which is
there's some blood. There's some bloodshed.
It's not a little bit. There's a bunch. But so anyway, so here's a process question for you. So the story unravels using a now and then storytelling device. This gives readers, a glimpse into a traumatic event that shapes character story arcs, helping them understand motives and actions in the present. But I'm curious how you wrote these. Did you write then in like a linear fashion before moving on to now, or did the chapters just unfold?
I did write them back and forth. So I would write a now chapter and a then chapter and a now chapter and a then chapter. And I think just because I had sort of been trained using multiple perspectives, I wrote a trilogy called the Fatal Folklore Trilogy, which was a series of horror books. And I had primarily two main characters, but there was a rotating point of view. So I kind of got used to writing in that rotating point of view. So it was easy for me to sort of break and go back. So it was almost like writing two different characters, because there's the Cal of the before, what is called his very hot day, which was what him and his therapist call it. So they don't have to say every time they reference it, the active shooter event. They just call it that very hot day. And then there's the Cal after that very hot day, who's a very different character, who's beaten up, also launched into being a detective, and has no small amount of imposter syndrome.
Bill, did you have trouble, because it's the same character, but he's very much more damaged. Did you have in the now, did you have trouble that line between those two?
No, because we don't see a whole lot of sort of pre-Cal, like patrol officer days. We don't get to explore that much. I mean, it all unfolds on that day. So he really, that first act, within the first chapter, he is just completely responding. There's not a lot of time for introspection. So we don't get to see like who he was before, even what he had for breakfast that day.
Yeah.
And and then even when he gets up to that conference room door and he wheels in, everything is blank until we revealed what happens. But it wasn't too hard to go back and forth, because we don't get to see a lot of early Cal. But I think he was a bit more of a hopeful, gentle soul before then, and he's definitely beat up afterwards. And he doesn't want that day to change him. He wants to hang on to that. He doesn't want to go out armed and stacked, to the teeth. Every time he goes out to a movie, he is desperately trying to hold on to that part of himself.
He's not a gun bunny. Is that what you?
Gun bunny. Somebody told me, an instructor told me that phrase, and I just figured everybody knows what it is.
Yeah, they do.
Well, good. Sorry for my involuntary shiver there, but when you said pre-Cal, I had my own PTSD come.
There's no math in this podcast. I was promised no math.
No math.
Exactly.
We might give you a question or two.
Well, Chris was talking about the now and then, and as those early chapters from going back and forth, it really had the effect of ratcheting up the tension, sort of like on a trebuchet, and then you launch the reader forward in when it's fully centered in the presence. And I thought one of the strengths of the book was the pacing; it was exceptional. Did that occur organically as you wrote, or do you consciously, as a writer, do you say to yourself, something needs to happen? It's been a while since something happened, or is pacing something that you really emphasize on revision?
I gotta be honest, and I'm sure we'll talk about this. And this isn't a shameless plug for the James Patterson project, but right around this time, I started thinking of writing this book. I learned that there might be an opportunity to write with James Patterson, and I should probably go off and read a couple of his books if I want to do my homework, which I did. And those short, choppy, chapters that leave you wanting more, just that forward motion, that propulsive nature. After reading 3 or 4 James Patterson books, that kind of informed how I wanted to tell the story. Like, there is definitely that part of me that would love to have characters sitting in a diner and talking about their feelings for the entire second act. My agent tells me, please don't do that. But I took a page from Mr. Patterson and tried to keep it moving, keep it popping. So I definitely wanted to have the action, as much action as you can have in this sort of detective tale.
Well,
it is not necessarily purely a thriller. It is not.
No, and action, I don't necessarily mean like a big violent set piece. I mean, there's a lot that propels this story forward, and I just felt like you hit all the notes perfectly, and I just didn't know if that was something that, the story just lent itself to, or do you consciously go, hey, I need something to happen right now?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think I had the idea for years for the serial killer aspect of the story, but I think the active shooter response aspect to the story, when I realized it was the same story, I think there was just a lot there to play with.
I want to turn this for a second to Sean. Sean, did you realize or recognize as you were reading the story when the now and then, as you think about it right now, when that ended? Because as I sit here thinking about, like, at what point did that stop and it just become the present? So I actually can't figure. I don't remember when.
I didn't realize it the moment it happened, but after a few chapters in the now, I realized that for that time being, we had all we needed to know about then.
Yeah.
And it made sense too. Like, I mean, that's all we need to know right then. Any other revelations would make more sense later in the story. And again, that's why I thought your initial question was very interesting, because my gut, Bill, was that you were going to answer, yeah, I wrote it in the way it was presented, just because it seemed like it made so much sense. But by the same token, some people, if they're writing on dual timelines, will separate the timelines and write them. So I was interested, but no, I think, again, I pictured in my head, and I pictured like this ratcheting up, because you'd end a chapter in now and then flip to then, and you'd be like, okay, I want to know what happened then, but I also want to know what happened. I mean, like it's like one of those things where as a reader, you're just like, you can't stop, because you're just as tied into both now and then, as anything. So even though you're really anxious to get to the next chapter, what you're reading is still important too. So
that is the goal. Like, because believe me, I get frustrated with sort of dual timeline stories or multiple perspective stories, because you get invested.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I don't want to break away from this chapter. The challenge is to make them both compelling enough that you're excited to jump from chapter to chapter.
And it wasn't frustrating in the sense of, because I was so interested in hearing each story. Yeah. But by the same token, there is that little, God, you
can't break away now.
All right, hey, what are you doing? What are you, a thriller writer?
But the way it shook out, it pretty cleanly and naturally stopped at the first act. Like you said, Sean, you got all you needed to know for the rest of the story. And then I had one line that says, "We will now be joining Cal in the present full time." And then that got cut.
Barbara was like, "Bill, no, you're funny, but not that funny."
Yes, and please read it in a British accent.
All right. So go into the book just a little bit. So there were several times when I was reading and I stopped and I went, One time was during the conversation Cal has with Daisy. I don't want to give any spoilers here, but and he sees a wolf tattoo on her wrist, and it has to do with well, I don't want to ruin it, but it reminded me of the Lobo, right, in the new Puss in Boots movie that I just recently watched with my kids, and I was like, wow, it's pretty cool that he interjected something like that into it. But then there was another that really had me scratching my head, and then I went and Googled it because I actually wasn't aware of it, but it made complete sense. It was the mention of the Stockdale Paradox, which you expertly inserted into the story. But would you mind explaining what the Stockdale Paradox is, who it's named after, and why
Sure.
it resonates with the guilty one?
And it kind of goes back to just sort of presenting your best self. So Admiral Stockdale was, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but was a fighter pilot in Vietnam. And he gets shot down, and he realizes as his plane is crashing that I am leaving the modern world. I am entering the world of Epictetus, who was a Stoic philosopher. He realizes as he's crashing, I'm going to be here for at least 5 years. Ended up being 7, but he's like, I'm going to be gone for 5 years. And years later, he was interviewed, and somebody had asked him, who are the ones that survived in the camp? Who are the ones that perished in the POW camps? And he said, oh, that was easy. The ones that died were the optimists. And the interviewer said, what do you mean by that? So the optimists would think, okay, we're going to be released by Christmas. It's going to happen. We're going to be released by Christmas. And then Christmas would come. They wouldn't get released. And they're like, we're going to be out of here by Easter. And Easter would come, and they'd be like, okay, we're going to be out of here by Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving would come, and we're going to be out of here by Christmas. And they ultimately died of a broken heart. So the Stockdale Paradox is having a radical acceptance of your current circumstances, but also realizing you will prevail in the end. And that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted Cal to sort of, I do like Stoic philosophy a lot. And I wanted Cal to sort of have that sort of radical acceptance of his circumstances, but knowing he will prevail in the end. And also trying to, all right, this is where I'm at, but this is where I'm heading. I want to try and express the best version of myself. And it was funny. One of the notes from the editor was like, can we have another chapter with Heather and what Cal sees in Heather, because she is his object of affection and longing, and we just want one more chapter. So that was that chapter where I introduced the Stockdale Paradox, where she's telling Cal, and she's telling him after being wounded in an active shooter situation and doesn't have the use of her legs, and she is sort of lecturing him to say, hey, I'll stick it out if you stick it out. And that Cal's just like, I'm smitten. I'm all in on her.
She's such a great character in the way
She's a phenomenal character.
Yeah, the way that he grows because of her. I think just well-written character. Loved it.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I won't bring up the Phil Hartman Admiral Stockdale and ruin the entire thing.
Yeah, I remember him running. Why am I even here? And like, if that's all you know about Admiral Stockdale, you are missing,
it is sad. It is
out.
sad because he's a legit hero, and he's reduced to a phenomenally funny Phil Hartman sketch, but whatever. Well, let's sticking in the book. Any interplay between the psychologists. There's an interesting exchange where Cal realizes he's not that unique. He's sort of a standard patient. His problems, though extraordinary to him, are just another day at the office for her. And as he goes through this investigation, for reasons I'll leave to the readers, he's constantly trying to prove his worth, both to himself and to others. And as that sort of struck home with me, I wonder, was that a theme when you set out that you wanted to explore? Does it have any real life resonance as like an observation of society, for instance, or is it just something that the story gave you?
Well, I just wanted to, again, I'm just going to regurgitate a lot of the wisdom that I've learned on the podcast from guys like Nick Petrie and Don Bentley, like do the same, but different. So I think we've had a lot of stories where, you have, the haunted detective who's disappearing in a bottle, or you have the haunted detective who is forced to meet with the department psychiatrist or psychologist. And all right, can we take that a step further? I just wanted to try and do that. So with meeting the psychologist every week, it's not something that he feels like he has to do. He feels like it's something that he gets to do. And he actually has a pretty warm relationship with Dr. Julia, and he may be a little sweet on her at the same time.
A little bit.
She's
Her too, a little bit.
Yeah. And she's sitting there ticking off his symptoms, and she's like, this is great and he's like, it's great that I'm fucked up. And she's like, no, you're refreshingly fucked up. You're presenting symptoms as you should. This is natural. This is what happens. You've experienced trauma. You're like clockwork. You should take some comfort in that, and you can work through these things. So I just wanted a different perspective. What is maybe a different twist on a scene or a relationship that we've seen before. So I love her as a character because she calls him on his crap, and he enjoys it, and it's the best. I think they have the best interplay of any two characters.
Their dialogue is
excellent,
funny, pretty good.
Well, you verbalized something that I don't think has been verbalized too much in fiction, and that's the fear of being ordinary. And it was just it really hit home with me, because I think we all have, especially like if you're a writer, you don't want to put something out there that somebody go, oh yeah, I've read this book 1,000 times, and I thought that was a really unique aspect to the character that I was trying to think of a character that had that fear. I mean, there's a lot of fears expressed, but the fear of being ordinary in a way, and I mean, it's explicit in that conversation, but it also sort of echoes through the rest of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we want our heroes to be extra special, but he also kind of has to be, for Cal to work, he has to be grounded as an everyman. Like he is relatable, he is not the toughest guy. He is not a Navy SEAL. He's not a badass operator, door kicker. Like he is not that guy. But he can take a licking and keep on ticking. He's going to keep going. Nothing is going to stop him. He does have grit. And I think that goes back to the Stockdale Paradox part of it. Like he's, but again, that's probably a meta commentary too. Like, I don't want this character to be ordinary. I don't want to be an ordinary writer. I want to try and distinguish myself a little bit. And he's got a fair bit of imposter syndrome. So, read into that what you will.
You do mention that. But Bill, you are clearly not an ordinary writer. You're very talented. Something I would not say to Don Bentley if he's listening. Oh, no, I love Don. He is very talented. But anyway, so
and he would beat both of our.
Yeah, he would. He's a big, strong man. But I'd probably outshoot him. But anyway, so get Don out of this. But I know you were never a police officer, although I just find out your father at one point was a police officer. You were never a detective, yet the guilty one reads pretty damn authentic, from the organizational structure of the Alexandria Police Department to the interactions and dialogues between the detectives, the seniors, and the rookies and the uniform officers, to the execution of the search warrant, which I've been on a search warrant for. I don't want to give anything away, but for what's in the story, I've done that exactly. So I was like, that's pretty interesting. That's cool. And the active shooter scenario. It all rang very true. So now, obviously, getting close to the real thing is important to the story, to you as the author. And so what advice would you give to aspiring authors who aren't subject matter experts seeking to create the same level of authenticity?
Well, I mean, obviously, read. My favorite genre is crime fiction. And, we've all watched and, absorbed all of our favorite detective stories. So there's a bit of that. You also have to do a bit of research, clearly. And I know a lot of folks who have been in law enforcement. So there's that. And then you hopefully have a character who's a living, breathing character, and you can, through your imagination, extrapolate. The active shooter stuff was different. So in my day job, I work for a federal agency, and we developed the first ever sort of federal active shooter materials to help infrastructure, respond to an active shooter situation. Back in 2007, 2008, there was no stop, drop, and roll campaign, if you will, for active shooters. So we had a lot of our private sector partners come to us and say, like, we need a campaign. We need something to educate, kids in malls and people working the registers. Can you help us? So we partnered with law enforcement, and we came up with a break room poster and a wallet card and a guidebook, just things to do if you are in if you find yourself in that sort of situation. Run, hide, fight. Back then there were no real materials.
Yeah. See something, say something. So that like none of that existed. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So but because of that, my shop kind of was synonymous with active shooter events. So anytime anything would happen, we would have to do a lot of research. We would have to report out on it. So there was like 5 years there where anytime there was an active shooter event anywhere in the country, I would have to kind of bone up on it. And not a fun part of the job for sure, but I was able to. That's why I don't take that stuff lightly. Like I didn't just put it in for entertainment's sake, or I'm just going to write this. Like it obviously not fun, but it was, that part of the fiction was definitely informed. Believe me, I am not a first responder. My weapon of choice is PowerPoint. Like I am not that guy, but I did have to really deal with at least the academic part of that for several years. So hopefully that rang true.
Yeah, very much.
And how that affects people. And then the other detective stuff, I want to give a shout out to 400 Things Cops Should Know. Adam Plantinga, if you're out there, read that cover to cover. That was a great resource. So between resources like that, living and breathing detective fiction, imagination and extrapolation.
Look at that. He's got it.
It's over there. Over there.
Did you end up doing any ride-alongs? Because I know, you and I both live in the Northern Virginia area, but did you do any ride-alongs with the
So I have been, I have a friend on the Alexandria Police Department who is going to set that up for me. When I was writing this, we were deep in the pandemic, so did not get the opportunity to do that. But
take advantage of it, bro. I mean, definitely do it. Just don't cross into Fairfax County. Just don't cross.
Well, okay.
Stay where you are.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Like a threat. Was that a threat?
No, not for me. Not for me.
Well, I thought it was a threat, Bill.
I've seen interactions between
Chris takes his jurisdiction very seriously.
You mentioned it very briefly, and for someone who's outside of the Northern Virginia area, wouldn't pick up on it. But you mentioned about Cal not going into Fairfax County because he would stand out like a sore thumb. But but you'll get that in the story. But for me, that resonated just because I've seen the interactions between Alexandria and Fairfax County cops. And it's sometimes good, sometimes
but that's an extrapolation thing. Like you worked for the federal government for a while. I worked for the federal government. Like we know how we are with other agencies. Yeah. Like everybody's territorial.
Yeah, very much.
Everybody's guarding their slice of the pie, and it's ridiculous. So it's not really hard to think that two counties are going to give each other shade. I mean, when the chips are down, they back each other up. But
100%.
steady state, they're going to give each other a ration of shit.
Well, another part of the authenticity that Chris was talking about, and he actually alluded to this, but for me was the dynamic between Cal and his partner, LeVar Sidmore. And I'll include the interactions with Massey and Porter, the other detective team. These types of relationships have been portrayed in hundreds, thousands of crime thrillers and procedurals. But I felt like your renderings were fresh and they defy cliche. So as you were writing the dialogue and constructing the scenes, and this might be a revision question, but how do you safeguard against the same old in a well-trodden genre?
So for that one, I had started writing the character and it was seeming a little cardboard. And then I remembered the interaction I had with my old chief in the Coast Guard, and very similar type character. Very crusty, very colorful, hilarious. But I was like, oh, I am going to steal his essence. Because at one point, Cal's a tall character and he just feels like next to this short, compact, clearly senior detective who knows his stuff. He just feels like a pool noodle. He just feels, like one of those inflatable characters out front of a car wash. He just feels like a dumb young kid who doesn't have any control over his limbs. next to his partner who is, wizened and has been around the block and has seen everything. I'm like, that's an interaction that I understand. When I was on ship with my chief, and it just seemed like, and that also I think helped feed the imposter syndrome aspect of it as well. He clearly has this senior detective who is very capable, and he just gets partnered with him. And though it's a great opportunity for Cal, he can't help but feel like, oh geez,
Yeah, but
I love that he's. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I love how he's constantly trying to keep Cal in the lane. Like, dude, this is your lane. Stay in this lane. Nothing good's going to happen if you go outside of your lane.
And of course, nobody wants to be told to go outside of their lane, but he's learned that from bitter, hard experience. And my chief, I remember as a young ensign on a cutter, he calls me up to combat. He's like, I want you to stand over there and not say a word. I was like, okay, chief. And he called the whole division in, and he's like, Mr. Schweigart and I are disgusted with your performance. And he just lays into everybody. And I had no idea any of this was coming. And I am 22 years old, 23 years old. And I'm just sitting there like, and then he's like, get the f- out of here. And they all file out. And he just turns to me, he's like, you good with that? I'm like, yes, chief. Sure thing, chief. So that was, I stole his essence.
Love it.
And put him on there.
One of the things I think made that went against convention there was that even though he felt like the inflatable balloon, and even though he knew that he felt like a young kid and was learning at this guy's feet, it didn't stop him from giving him complete crap at different times. Like instead of being so cowed and so, afraid to, clap back every now and then. I thought that part I loved because it just, I don't know, resonated with me because that's probably the smart ass type of person.
I mean, he can't restrain himself too long. His natural personality is going to come out, and you can't ride next to somebody for 6 months or so and not bust their chops.
Yeah. Just like the coffee scene, like getting coffee.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually a perfect segue to my follow-up here. So people familiar with Bill Schweigart, or Billy Schweigs, as those of us who pretend we grew up with you call you. You're a witty person, you're a witty soul. Humor is a calling card. And again, I think you struck the perfect balance with the gallows humor, the irony, the sarcasm, as with the weight of the story. But did your beta readers or you yourself on revision, did you have to excise one-liners and jokes to kind of keep that balance?
I have had to do that in the past, and I'm sure that I did it before. But yes, I have been, especially beta readers for the earlier stuff, for the hard books, the Fatal Folklore trilogy, I got knocked around a bit. Like, hey, you are deflating the tension by throwing in a joke here. So that is something that I definitely have had to work on. But that's why they have editors. But I do police myself. But yeah, there were, especially the James Patterson stuff, there's a ton of great jokes that are on the cutting room floor. He's like, yeah, we're not doing that.
Jimmy didn't like any of those, huh?
No, you got enough of a sense of the character, but yeah, I was like, that's a great joke. We're not in the joke business. So
I beg to differ.
Fair enough. So I do think, the careful application of humor really helps with personality and makes you care for a character more if done correctly. So, just enough, a soupçon, just enough.
Imagine how successful that guy could be if he would just learn how to incorporate humor into his work.
Just a little bit. So Bill, publishing is a wicked industry, and I don't mean that in a Boston wicked. I just mean it sucks. It can break your ego, your sanity, your health. We've all faced rejection at all stages of publishing: agent rejection, publisher rejection, reader rejection. So how do you cope with those rejections that are inherent in the industry? Any advice?
Let me take a drink.
Yeah, we should all. Hold on.
Yes, that's a perfect segue. Well, it's inevitable, and I've certainly had my fair share, but success is not a straight line. And I would share this with any prospective writers out there who are in the audience, is that after the Fatal Folklore trilogy, I wrote a spy novel with a female protagonist, and it was great. And it was I loved it. I loved that character. Unfortunately, it didn't go. It did get far with a publisher, and they were championing it, and they took it to Ed Board, but it got shot down in the room. Fast forward a year or two, she goes to work for that editor, goes to work for James Patterson, and my agent and her having lunch, and she informs Barbara, hey, he's always looking for new collaborators. Do you have anybody that you would recommend? And Barbara says, yeah, I got somebody, Bill Schweigart. And she's like, I remember Bill. I love that book. So sometimes things in the moment suck and can break your heart. And I've certainly had my heart broken a few times, but you just it's like the Stockdale Paradox, man. You just keep moving. You just keep your head down. And ultimately, you have to just enjoy the craft. You have to enjoy the process of writing. And I find now I'm at the point where if I'm not hitting my daily word count, I'm a crabby bitch, man. I feel better when I am stacking words. When I'm
what is that word? What is the word count for you? What is it?
So still have the day job. So it is very minor. It is, for me, it is 250 words a day,
Dude,
which is
that's a page.
It's a page.
Yeah.
And if you do that every day, at the end of a year, you've got a first draft. The first book I wrote, it was a Coast Guard adventure called Slipping the Cable. I was young, I was single, and I'm
sorry, what was he doing to the cable?
I could have used an editor with the title. Notoriously shitty with titles. The Guilty One was not my title, believe me.
What was the title before? What was your working title?
The working title was Jackknife Smile. And everybody was like, better. Yeah, that's a bucket of shit. We're not doing that. I was like, okay, sure.
I know why you would say that, but
so
Guilty One's pretty.
I'm gonna go with Tiny Dancer.
I would have went with cut butt cheeks.
Well, Barbara already is telling me that if we get a sequel, it is not going to be called The Guilty 2.
No.
Yeah, she's like, don't even.
It would have been. I would have.
Don't even try. But yeah, so success is not always a straight line. You just got to keep your head down, and you just got to keep doing it. And if obstacles put in your path, you just got to roll over it. But it's tough. It can be a heartbreaking business, but again, we will prevail in the end.
Amen to that. So no Guilty 2, but the way you left things off at the end kind of leads readers to believe that there might be some more Cal stories in the future. So is that how you envision this? Is it a series, standalone? Like, what's the deal?
I would love for it to be a series. In fact, the Not Guilty 2 is written. So we're talking to the publisher now. So if you want more Cal Farrell, leave a review, write your congressman, tweet at Crooked Lane Books, whatever.
Well, ballpark, how many books do we need to strong arm our viewers into buying to make sure we get Cal Farrell?
Look, if every one of your viewers buys 200 books, which I don't think is a lot to ask.
Not a lot to ask.
200 bucks, folks.
You promised me there would be no math.
I mean, wait till they get to be $1.99 on Kindle. But still $400 a person. We can do that.
Dude, he is your congressman and mine. I'm so gonna send a letter to Gerald Connelly to see if he'll buy your book.
He's like, who is this guy? What?
No, but seriously, viewers, you're on the show. You support the show by watching. You enjoy these interviews with these authors. The way to make us all believe that you support the show is to buy Bill's book.
The other thing, Sean, is like the people we have on the show. Obviously, we read your books. We've read your book. We wouldn't if this book sucked. Right. We love you, Bill, but you wouldn't be on the show.
I appreciate that. I would just to your reader,
It's a great book.
To your viewers, I would just say I would hate to have to close the orphanage
Of cats.
But Lee Goldberg, Nick Petrie.
God, yeah.
I think Don Bentley likes it. You know, I mean, everybody that reads it likes it. So don't just take Chris's word for it. Take mine.
Take Sean's word. My word's shit.
Well, Bill, you've made it through the main portion of the interview, which again, you know, we had some viewers. We had an odds thing up online, and several people bet against you. So
I thought I was going to tap out. That's fair.
The house wins. The house wins.
Cheers.
Cheers to you. Cheers to you.
Cheers to you.
You know the drill because you've actually written lightning round questions.
Yes.
They
get dumber. They're going to get dumb on this one.
I see that I've actually deleted one of mine somehow, so I'm going to have to make one up on the fly. It should be fun. The first one, Elvis Costello tabs you as a co-writer for his next album. This isn't really true. This is a hypothetical, so don't get.
It could happen.
I thought
he called me right for the show. I just want to you're the first to know. What song title, hook, or lyric is Bill Schweigart bringing to Elvis?
As we have previously discussed, I am shit with titles. So I would, because I'm lazy, I would say, "Hey, what do you think about Jackknife Smile, Elvis?" And he'd be like, "I'm sorry, mate. We can't. We're not doing this. We shan't work together again."
Barbara Powell fires you.
Yes.
You know what? Just to prove it can be done, I'm going to write a song called Jackknife Smile tonight, just for you. And we'll send it to Elvis.
Oh my gosh! And have your brother sing it.
Yes.
Yeah. That would be hilarious.
Right. All right. Question 2, which is actually question 3, because question 2 is no longer there.
Really?
I swear to God. I looked at him like, what's happened? All right.
My computer virus is working. I am.
Yes. What agency is that you work for? Damn it.
So exactly. So a lot of people find writing cathartic. Did you write The Guilty One as a way with dealing with all the heavy shit you saw on the Coast Guard? And does being around pools bring on, as Nick Petrie might say, static?
I want you to know that if you are around a pool, I have jurisdiction. Anytime it rains, I have jurisdiction. Everybody's got Coast Guard jokes. Okay.
I have several.
I know, but when I'm ever in a crowd or was in a crowd with Navy guys and they were busting on the Coast Guard, I would say, "Hey, do you know why Coast Guard ships come in before Navy ships?" And they'd say, "Why?" I said, "So Navy wives can have good looking kids too."
What? Oh,
and they'd be like, "That shit's not funny, man. That shit's not funny."
How many times is your nose broken?
Yes, well, I got to be pretty fast, but that would usually be like, that's not cool, man. So that's how we play. We play for keeps in the Coast Guard.
The Coast Guard.
Okay, so my off the cuff question is actually not funny. Not that was funny. But it's more of a serious question. Outside of The Guilty One, which is outstanding, and if you will permit me to say, without it sounding as an insult, you leveled up. I mean, I loved I loved your work stuff.
I'll take it.
So you leveled up. So it just really kind of blew my mind. But outside of that, what is your favorite thing you've written? And I'm including something that all our viewers should be going back through your Twitter and finding, is Running Light, the book that you published online, which I think is freaking a lot of fun, and I loved it.
That was your serial one, right?
What is your favorite thing you've written prior to The Guilty One?
Prior to The Guilty One, I would have to say it's Running Light. It was just a ton of fun because I didn't have to cut any jokes. They all made the final draft. No, that was fun. That was just that's about a 90s sort of alternative rock star who she is, in current days. She doesn't have much of an audience anymore, and she's trying to eke out a living, and she on tour meets and falls for a risk analyst, and they are sort of diametrically opposed personality wise, but sort of their trials and tribulations in making it work. And it was just I got to explore music, which I love, and put some Coast Guard stuff in there. And it was just a lot of fun. It was just one of those novels that just sort of, flowed like water.
I thought it was outstanding. And producers out there, it is available for option.
Sure.
Schweigart Cameron Productions is happy to co-produce.
Somebody
leaving me out of this?
Oh no, you're assistant to Mr. Cameron.
Thank you.
The credits.
I will get coffee. I'm good at that. Yeah, I'm pretty good.
Best boy.
Best
boy, yeah. Or
key grip. Key grip.
I was gonna say key grip, yeah. There was some Coast Guard stuff in this book. Although maybe it was Navy stuff.
Navy stuff.
It was Navy stuff. Yeah. About the knots and whatnot. I was waiting for the Coast Guard stuff. I was like, yeah, maybe he wanted to write Coast Guard, but then he thought people would think it was uncool, so he wrote Navy stuff.
Barbara probably would have been like, enough with the pump the brakes. Pump the brakes, Coastie. She's like, enough.
All right, so here are my questions. These are serious questions that need serious answers. In one lighthearted scene, a character mentions 90 balloons of heroin hidden in his rectum. First, a serious question. First, why 90? And B, what did your wife think of that line?
I hope she laughed. She didn't dwell on it, I can tell you that. But I remember being in a constitutional law class.
Yeah.
And there was a case where somebody had shoved something like an obscene number of balloons up there.
One would be an obscene number, just to be clear.
Yeah, and the judge described it as like, and he tried not to go to the bathroom because he didn't want to get caught, and the judge made some sort of line like, after a heroic 12-hour effort. And I just thought it was the funniest thing that this judge called the man's struggle heroic. And I was like, that stuck with me. My brain is filled with these useless facts.
I loved it though.
Gotta be.
Your useless fact though became one of my questions because it stuck with me. Unfortunately, as I read that, I was like, wow, 90 balloons in someone's record.
I wrote an entire novel just so I could use that joke.
I loved it. All right. Here's my second question. In The Guilty One, there are references to Spring-Heeled Jack and Jack the Ripper. One's fictional, the other very real, that over the years countless authors have used as a template in crafting murder mysteries. So why do you think readers and authors, for that matter, are drawn to this evil? Why do you think readers, why what about the macabre that people just love?
I don't know. And that was kind of the seed of the book. I honestly think if Jack the Ripper had been caught and his identity was known, people wouldn't care as much. It would sort of take the fantastical element away. You've got, he's almost portrayed as this, spectral boogeyman who can appear and disappear at will, and nobody ever knew what he was. But if it was just, Joey Bag of Donuts in London, nobody would care. But that's how, he's a legend, a horrible, monstrous legend to be sure, but still captures the imagination. And that was kind of the seed of the whole book. Like, I wanted to do my take on Jack the Ripper, basically.
Awesome. Good enough. All right. So here's the last question that you will have to answer. Seriously. If you had to swap me and Sean for characters in your story, Guilty One, I think I know which one would be Sean. I think everybody would know which one would be Sean.
Heather.
No, not Heather.
What? No, I'm sorry.
No.
That's not where we're
clearly not on the same page here, buddy.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I misunderstood the question.
I'm not even sure which one I would be, but go ahead.
I knew exactly who you would be. He's swinging 70 feet up in the air.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so if he's swinging 70 feet up in the air, who am I? If you had to swap characters.
Oh man, I mean, if
his first question gave this away.
If we're killing him, I mean, I feel parody. I've got to kill you, so you're gonna have to be.
No.
All
right, feathers. Can I have feathers? I'll take feathers.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. All right.
We'll make you we'll make you super cop. So we'll make you.
God, no, I don't want to. I want to.
So Chris, like you ask him a question, but then you dictate what his answer.
Yeah, I know, I did.
That's
It's your podcast.
broke the code.
John, I mean, does
Look,
it go
he's
any
like-
other way?
He's like, which character on page 137 am I?
Yeah.
So you bring that up. I will say I read this. Bated breath, turning the pages, just hoping, waiting, not to see Sean's name. Maybe Chris's name.
I gotta keep you guessing. I gotta keep folks.
It's there.
Leave a review, make it happen, and we'll bring Albanese in here.
I mean, I would have blasted that like page,
297, Chris. Too many
290
acknowledgments.
I do appreciate it. You do mention us in the acknowledgments, and Sean
You guys
and I,
are-
Mike.
You guys are huge champions of the genre and wonderful friends to me. I super appreciate it.
Super fans, brother. Fans.
Yeah, Bill. I honestly, I root for success in the genre, and we've met so many great authors who are also great people. But you're one of my favorites, and I'm thrilled for you. I'm thrilled for the James Patterson book. I'm thrilled but I'm really thrilled for this book. And readers, viewers, buy this damn book because we need to see the Guilty 2 or
Guilty 2 and Guilty 3.
Guilty 3.
4, 5, 6. All right, I'll take
Thank
it.
you, fellas.
Cheers to
brother.
you, my friend.
Cheers to you guys, and cheers to Mike in absentia.
Well, that was exactly as expected. A blast with our friend Bill Schweigart, who's a very guilty soul, who wrote The Guilty One, guilty of writing a great book. And you, dear viewer, need to buy this because we need to see The Guilty One Part 2.
Or the Guilty 2.
Or The Guilty 2.
Or 3.
Or 3.
Let's raise it.
Mine's empty, but I'll raise it anyway.
Oh, mine's not. I refilled it.
Good to be back.
Missing Mike.
If only for a moment.
Yeah.
Cheers to Mike. We'll see you guys next time.
See you guys. Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be? Can you stop recording?
Recording in progress.
Like all this, I like it's too strong.
So, Bill, that's a hell of a nice looking poster there over your shoulder.
Are we recording?
Is there a story there?
At the launch party.
I was there.
And
I was there.
You were there, and I'm gonna get it framed. I just hadn't gotten around to getting it framed, and I just sort of had it in the corner of my office. And we have too many cats, and the cats are in the middle of a bit of a turf battle, and one of them may have sprayed the poster.
Oh my God.
Right where Don Bentley signed it.
It's Don Bentler.
That's what you get for ignoring Bob Barker.
Tell you what.
How many
Tell you
times? Spay and neuter your pets. Spay and neuter your pets.
She sleeps right between my wife and me, like our faces, which is what you want. A half feral cat sleeping by your face. It's like sleeping with a hand grenade.